Now, time for the business news on the programme. And Brussels announced yesterday that it is proposing a ban on coal imports from Russia. Solange Mugin is with us. She's got that and the rest of the business news for us. Solange.
Yeah, first and foremost, Stuart, this is a big deal because this is the first time that Europe has put energy into its sanctions. And as well, in the first 4 rounds of sanctions, the U.S. refrained from touching the energy sector because Europe's dependence on Russia for coal, gas and oil. Now, by taking this step with coal, Brussels is trying to send the message that even if it depends on Russia for 45% of its coal and 70% of its thermal coal, so that's a lot of coal, and this will hurt the economy, Europe is willing to shut some taps. And a coal ban, if okayed unanimously by all 27 nations, would cut some 4 billion euros per year in payments to Russia. It sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but it shies in comparison to other energy sources. On a whole, Europe still uses more oil, natural gas, and even more renewables and nuclear than coal. But European leaders say it is still quite significant and a first step.
The position of the French presidency is very clear. We stand ready to reinforce the sanctions. Oil and coal are a possibility, and then we need to discuss and to build unity among the 27 member states.
There are discussions what can be done in the area of energy like coal and oil. There are discussions what further sanctions there could be on a trade side. But what I think it's important in this situation that we are coming forward with a strong and credible sanctions package in the views of atrocities which we are seeing what Russian army is committing in Ukraine.
Now, one of the reasons coal was picked as the first step for Europe is that sourcing it elsewhere is a bit easier. Countries like the US, Colombia, South Africa, Australia and Canada, they could step in with contracts. And it's easily transportable as well. But, and this is the big but, it is dirty energy. Coal remains the most polluting energy source, and the EU has been trying to wean off it for years. At least that was before gas prices went up, and some sectors turned back to coal because of the climbing price of oil. And coal prices, too, though, are climbing, up 14% in closing in the US because nations like China are still heavily reliant on the resource. Turning now to how sanctions are affecting Russia, and specifically Russian workers. We take you to the town of Tolyatti. It is the Russian equivalent of what Detroit once was, a boom town built on car making. But with Russian sanctions, that has changed nearly overnight.
The city of Tolyatti is home to Russia's largest car maker, AutoVAZ. Majority owned by Nissan Renault, its assembly lines have stopped running. Sanctions have meant that it can no longer get components from abroad. Workers are on paid leave, getting just 2/3 of their usual wage.
Salary is a sensitive issue for all of us here. Everyone has to pay their credits and loans. The salary, of course, leaves a lot to be desired.
If AutoVAZ is unable to survive, its demise would mark the end of an industrial era for Russia and its Lada enthusiasts. The car maker has been making Lada vehicles since 1969. One of the employees, Sergei, is using some of his time to restore a Lada car from the 1980s to mark the 45th anniversary of the car's first production run.
My uncle came here to work in the factory in the 1970s. Then my father came. He moved my mother and me here, and my brother and sister were born here. All our relatives are in Tolyatti, and they worked in the factory.
Renault is under intense pressure to boycott Russia and is considering whether to withdraw from AutoVAZ. Meanwhile, Moscow says it could nationalize assets of foreign companies that have left the country.
Now to the markets. European markets opened down across the board, with London, Paris and Frankfurt slightly in the red. Asian markets were also down Wednesday, with Tokyo and Hong Kong dipping by more than 1%. This is due to investors being cautious after both the announcement of the new sanctions coming from Europe and also due to the fact that the U.S. Federal Reserve said that they are planning aggressive monetary moves to keep inflation in check, such as interest rate hikes. Now, the minutes of the Fed's meeting are expected later today. And finally, for me, the continuation of the Elon Musk Twitter saga. After the news that Musk had become the largest shareholder of the social media platform with 9% of its stock, Twitter announced that Musk is joining the company's board. And already there is change about, as Twitter announced that it is going to test drive an edit button on its paid service. This will allow users to rectify their tweets. This is something that Musk had just asked his 80 million followers about in a poll, and the overwhelming majority said that they wanted one. But Twitter says that Musk's poll had nothing to do with the decision, and it is true that many famous people and unfamous people like myself have long wanted, Stuart, an edit button on Twitter.
You know what this is about, don't you? Spelling.
Yes, exactly.
And my spelling is terrible, so this would be fantastic.
It would be wonderful.
I pray for it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Solange Mouget with the papers with the business on France 24.